Well, hey, Angel fans, welcome back to Halo Territory. I'm Mike DiGiovanna, former LA Times baseball writer and host of the show. Mark Drumbo couldn't be with us today. He's out dropping some knowledge on some young hitters, but we do have Sam Blum of The Athletic with us. Sam, welcome back to the show. How you doing, kid?
I'm just missing your better half, so
We all
hopefully
are.
he's
We'll have to figure out, we're just going to have to muddle our way through this somehow. So we have a few things to discuss today, one of them being Sam's recent coverage of the Rio Foster situation. But I want to start by taking a little temperature check on our halos. We're about 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. And I don't think it's any secret that neither Sam nor I have a very high opinion of this team right now. But one of us thinks this might be a historically bad season. Sam, any idea who that might be?
well. I mean, listen, I've already watched them have a historically bad season 2 years ago when they lost 99 games. This is the Angels are for as bad as they've always been, at least not always been, but in recent history, they have never lost 100 games. I think they're like one of maybe the only team to never lose 100 games. Um, so and that is kind of by design. I mean, they've always kind of given you enough to get you excited. That is the and I've used this word before. That's the grift, in my opinion. This time, it doesn't really feel like they're keeping the grift, but they're not really doing enough to put it together a team that I think can be competitive. Now, I always caveat that with maybe some miracle happens, but it's the roster itself. I think 1 through 9 is okay in some capacity, but it is the depth issue that to me is a serious problem, and really the bottom half of their 40-man roster is kind of going through a waiver churn at this point. I mean, the last couple of days they've DFA'd guys that they claimed on waivers earlier this offseason. So that's just kind of what they're doing right now. They don't, all while keeping Anthony Rendon on the 40-man roster. So I just don't really think they have any depth in their organization. I don't think that they're in a position to win, you know, 70 games. I don't. I mean, I think this could be their first 100 loss season, maybe worse than that. I don't know. I mean, we're all speculating and guessing, but I don't think they've done enough to earn the benefit of the doubt going into a season that they're going to be winning more than 60 games.
Yeah, people who have read my coverage in the LA Times over the last 3 decades may have a hard time believing this, but I was voted class optimist in my senior year of high school back in 1980. So I do have the capacity to look at the glass as being half full at times. I don't think the Angels are going to challenge the 2024 White Sox for a 121 loss season. Will they lose 100 games? Possibly. But I look at this roster, and even if everybody has solid to above average seasons and stays relatively healthy, I think you're looking at a 75 win team, maybe an 80-win team at the most.
I
And
mean,
yeah, go ahead, Sam.
no, I was going to say, I mean, even like last year they won 72 games, and that was with a rotation that I don't think had a sixth starter until like August. I mean, they were healthy. Look at their record in one-run games. I mean, they were really good in one-run games last year. I
Yeah.
mean, everything kind of fell apart in September, but ultimately, this team was overperforming in ways that I don't think are sustainable on a year-to-year basis. And that was a bad team last year. I mean, they won 72 and 90. That's not a good record. But they did that with winning games and winning a lot of one-run games with a closer that's one of the best all time. They don't have that closer
True.
anymore. And that was, with a healthy starting rotation that, listen, Jack Ohanowitz wasn't good, right? Like they were, Kyle Hendricks at times was very mediocre. I mean, this wasn't a great rotation, but it was a healthy one, and they didn't have to kind of go into the depths of it at any point, at least not before like September. And so this is, you're looking at a rotation that I think has some upside right now, but ultimately, like one guy gets hurt in that, and then you're probably starting 40% of your games with someone that has little to no experience and probably shouldn't even be in a major league rotation. So, I think that's where this, and their bullpen, again, the difference between, in my opinion, that White Sox team that you alluded to and even the Rockies team last year that was very similarly bad, the difference between those teams and the Angels, I think, is a semi-competent bullpen. I think they have some pieces there that could end up being decent. I understand trading Brock Burke was maybe for the best in terms of getting a controllable outfielder, which they needed. But you're also losing one of your most reliable relievers in exchange for guys who don't have you know track records last season outside of Drew Pomeranz. So, and he's going to be like 39, I think. So ultimately, I think the bullpen is a 50-50 kind of situation at this point, but does seem to me to be a little bit better on paper than maybe some of those teams that really, 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 really were horribly bad and were that bad because they blew a lot of games late.
Yeah, I took a deeper dive into the roster this week, and I looked at what the Angels have right now, and I thought if every one of these guys had like a career year, right? There's maybe two guys on the team who, with their career years, might garner MVP votes. Certainly Mike Trout. He's won three of the awards already. Maybe Joe Adell if he, builds on his breakout season last year, raises his OPS, lowers his strikeouts a bit. And then after those two, there's a handful of guys who I think could make an all-star team. Zach Neto, Kikuchi, maybe Alex Manoah or Kirby Yates because they did make all-star teams a few years ago. Maybe Jorge Soler because he's only 3 years removed from his last all-star team. But I look at the track record of these guys, and it just doesn't warrant much optimism uh, for me. Now, that being said, I do see a couple of wild cards who, if things swing right for the Angels, maybe they can make the difference of 5 or 6 wins. Grayson Rodriguez being the biggest one. This is the kid they got from the Orioles for Taylor Ward. Everyone seems to think he has the stuff to be a number two, maybe even a number one, but he hasn't pitched in a year and a half because of his elbow problems, so he obviously has to stay healthy. And then there's two big wild cards in the bullpen for me. Ben Joyce clearly has the stuff to be an elite closer. That the kid throws 100 to 105, but he just cannot stay healthy. I think throwing 100 to 105 has something to do with that. And then Robert Stevenson, I think even in the few innings we saw last year, he can be a pretty darn good setup man, but once again, hasn't been healthy for 2 solid seasons now. You just can't count on these guys. What are you seeing along these lines?
I mean, I don't think Joyce will. It's not determined this, but I don't think the expectation is he's going to be on the opening day roster. He's still hurt, I think, and so. I mean, again, these are injuries that you don't know how long they're going to really where they're at, and the Angels with their lack of transparency on these topics tend to make that guessing game a little more complicated. So, but I don't think the feeling right now is that Joyce is going to be on the opening day roster because he's coming back from his injury. Now, I think Joyce has some optimism. I talked to him earlier this offseason, and he sounded pretty happy about kind of where things were. But that was a few months ago, and it still is a process. So we'll see. But I mean, I agree with you. Like, and that is the case every year with the Angels, right? Like, you could always be like, well, if this guy is, to me, the biggest wild card is going to be Mike Trout,
Oh
it
yeah,
just has to be at this point. I mean, Mike Trout at the end of last year was playing at a level that probably shouldn't even have him in a major league starting lineup. He was just not
wow.
good at the from I would say early August to about the last week of September. His very last week he was very good, but I mean he was just not doing any. I mean he didn't hit a home run for like a full month. I mean he was striking out way too much. So and he wasn't playing the outfield, so he wasn't contributing in that way. So to me, I don't think Mike Trout was that player that we saw from August to middle of September last year. But I also don't know is he where he is at all, really, in terms of being a superstar caliber player. And then I think he's going to be 34 in August, right? So you know it's what it is, right? This is the way. This is what happens. I'm going to be 33 in September. I understand this. So, we all get it.
Well,
It's what it is, and to me, the question is: Mike Trout, is that guy going to be anywhere close to a middle of the order Mike Trout type player? Because right now he's name only. I mean that's
sure.
just the reality of it, and that is enough, I think, at times to get him on base, draw a lot of walks, get some pitches to hit where he's going to clock him over the fence, but. Where does that leave you in terms of being a guy who's going to get on base, that's going to have some speed, that's going to be able to play the outfield, like be a real well-rounded player in some capacity? And I think this is an issue for them right now. So, and you mentioned Soler, it creates this other problem where, again, he's a wild card player for me. He's a contract year. Perry's continuously brought up, he's done well in contract years, but I think he's 35. He's never been 35 in a contract year before. So again, he can't really play the outfield on a full-time basis in any capacity, but can Mike Trout? And if they both can't, can they both play? How do you navigate these things are big questions to me. Can then you have Joe Adell in center, where he's a net negative defensive
Yeah,
player in
I
center
don't
field.
like him
He's
there.
probably a net positive in right field, but can you put Trout in center because he's been your right fielder? They're kind of in a little bit of a conundrum with that issue, and I don't think it's really talked about enough how they navigate that. And then they just let go of Wade Meckler. I didn't know who they're going to really have in center and how they're going to deal with that. I assume the plan now is Adele in some capacity, or Josh Lowe or Bryce Teodosio. But I it's a problem how they're going to navigate that outfield.
Yeah, it's obviously been a while since Mike Trout has had what we'd consider a Mike Trout year. Are we almost to the point now where I hate to even think of this, but is Mike Trout, do we expect Mike Trout to be the guy that he's been for the last few years and that'll never, become even a semblance of Mike Trout again? 'Cause that would be a huge shame, obviously, for Angel fans and for Mike. But man, are we resigned to getting the Mike Trout that we've had for these last few years?
I think the Angels need to. I think in Trout and the Angels need to kind of figure out a way to make the most of the situation. I mean, there is a he's not just forgotten how to play baseball. I think that some of the skill sets that he had have not aged well, right? Like playing the field, running the bases necessarily, or even being able to like catch up to fastballs, which has always been an issue, but has become more of an issue, especially those high fastballs. So, how do you navigate that? How do you try to counteract the way teams are going to approach you? I mean, that's something he needs to figure out in a big way. Assuming knowing Mike, as you know, Mike, like I'm sure that is, he's not naive to these issues. I'm sure
Yeah.
he's very, very proactive in addressing them in some capacity. It's just a matter of, what does this look like? He's got 5 more years on this very expensive contract. They need to figure out a way. He needs to figure out a way to make those valuable years. Otherwise, it's going to be a long and painful, drawn out process that I don't think we'll ever get to like the Rendon level of kind of,
No.
angst, but it will become, it's not comfortable for anybody either. I mean, this is you never want to see your superstar age slowly in this way that becomes a detriment to the team. And I don't think that's where we're at all. But you look about 5 more years. I think that has to be, and what we saw at the end of last season. I mean, I just think you can't rule these things out.
Yeah.
You have to be proactive. You can't just be like he's going to show up to spring training and it's all going to be good again, because that has not been the case since 2022, really, or
Yeah.
even 2020.
There are 2 more weeks left in the winter. There is time to make moves. John Heyman tweeted just the other day a list of very fine pitchers who are still available. Framber Valdez, of course, Zach Gallen, Chris Bassett, uh, Zach Littell. From what I've seen, though, the Angels have only been mentioned with two of these guys, Zach Gallen and Zach Littell. I mean, at this point, can you see this team, Sam, making any kind of moves to improve the roster?
I mean, listen, you get Zach Allen, that's a good get. I don't
Yeah.
think it makes them a winning team, but it makes you close. It makes you a better team, right? I mean, that's for sure. Listen, didn't have the best year last year, Gallen, but he's Zach Gallen. Like he's a
Yes.
legit, very good major league pitcher. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, I think the other issue that people don't. I mean, there are two reasons, in my opinion, that the Angels don't really sign a lot of free agents, and maybe this year it has more to do with their lack of a desire to sign anyone for any major money. But I think that teams, no matter who they sign, they're going to have to overpay what other teams will have to pay for those same players. I think um, that's where I think the Angels are. I don't think players are like, I want to go play in Anaheim, outside
Mm.
of guys who are like, I'd like to go be close to home on the West Coast and in a low pressure environment. But anybody that's like looking to win, especially good players, like good free agents, they're not coming in. They're not looking to go to Anaheim because the
Yeah.
Angels are a mess on the field and they're a mess off the field. In a lot of ways. And I think people are becoming way more aware of that in recent years, and it's not an attractive option for teams. I just don't think I think that is playing a role in some of this, but it's also probably it's like probably plays a role in why they don't get like a Nolan Arenado, who they probably would have been willing to trade for.
Yeah.
Maybe that's kind of been the line, and I think what was it a couple of years ago? It was like Labor Torres didn't want to sign here. So and don't quote me on that. I probably shouldn't have even said it. Can't report that independently or anything, but that's kind of been the talk. And so I think that these issues are going to arise. And so, yes, getting Zach Allen would be great. Getting
Yeah.
Zach Littell, also fine. Getting any of those guys, that Tyler Anderson again, anybody would be fine, because you don't want to have to stick Caden Dana in the rotation right now. not saying he can't do it, but I think that's, we saw him pitch in the big leagues. He wasn't ready for it. So he's still so young. And so, part of the issue the Angels have is a lot of these guys on their 40-man roster, they are prospects who are probably not ready for the big leagues, but they have been
Yep.
called up early to fill innings in the bullpen. Sam Aldegheri, Caden Dana, Ryan Johnson, guys like that, who now, they're on your 40-man. So you are kind of working with those guys, and that's why they're having to DFA some guys who might be some good depth pieces for them, like
Yeah.
Wade Eckler and Osvaldo Vito the last few hours. So, not saying they're program changing, franchise changing players, but these are the kinds of decisions that accumulate. And when you have to start making them, you lose your depth, you lose your ability to really put together a competitive team. And I think like the Angels, we've seen it the last few days with the prospect rankings. I think the Athletic had them at 29th, and then ESPN this morning had them at 27th. To
Right.
lose this many years in a row and to never really improve your prospect situation in a substantive way is just a poor reflection on everybody involved.
Yeah. I do think Artie Moreno, the team owner, could generate some goodwill among these fans if if they would just do anything, make a move or two to make it look like they're trying, right? But then you look at it, it's like, is one or two players, short of Shohei Ohtani, going to turn this team, from a 70-win team to an 80-win team or a playoff contender? I don't think so. So you could almost argue that, why would Artie spend 20 million, 30 million, add that much to their payroll to a team that has no chance of winning when they're already losing millions with this really bad TV deal they're in right now? So to me,
I
it's
just think
like,
that gives too much credit to the Angels, though. I mean, this is a position they have put themselves in. So you're right. Does signing one or two guys do anything? No, does nothing for them.
yeah,
Really, they've done that. They have done that. Like I said, they've done that for years, where they have done enough to get people a little bit excited and then let them down by the time you get to August. That is, now what we're seeing is they do even less, and now they're letting people down by the time they get to May. That's
yeah,
the only difference right now. It's not. There's no substantive change. I think the problem is what would make fans happy, in my opinion, is when you get to the beginning of August and you're not doing well, trade away the guys that aren't going to, get people excited with some of these prospects. Put people in place that are going to develop those prospects, let them get to the point where they're ready to get to the big leagues, and not rush them up here, watch them stink, and then they never get better
yeah,
because you have failed them. And I mean, I think they're so fortunate to have had Zach Neto really, and I don't want to, whatever the Angels have done with Zach, if they've gotten him to this point, I will give them all the credit in the world because I think he is a budding superstar player. I think Shanuel probably is an underrated player. I mean, he needs to improve certain areas of his game, but he's a good major league player. The problem is everything else. They don't make any decisions that actually get you to the point where you are going to be sustainably competitive. I think that's what will make fans happy. It's not about acquiring Zach Gallen. Maybe that makes you better today than it did yesterday, but doesn't make you good as an organization now. It
yeah.
doesn't.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to analyze this team moving forward. But now I want to turn our attention to Rio Foster, the 22-year-old outfield prospect who suffered devastating brain injuries in a car accident last September in Washington State. Sam, for those of not me, those who might not subscribe to the Athletic, and I think there's still a few left out there, fill us in
Guys,
on what on what exactly happened to this kid and where we are.
So yeah, Rio. He in September he had gone to a horrible car accident. He was an Angels prospect who I think on the morning of September 4th was named the Northwest League Player of the Year in Tri City, which is the Angels High A affiliate. And then that night he was out at a bar and got into a car with a couple of acquaintances who were drunk. He was at least his mom believes he was also drunk and wasn't wearing his seatbelt and was ejected from the car. And his whole life has kind of been just upended. I mean, at least as of when I visited him earlier this month, he was, unable to carry a conversation, unable to walk, unable to eat on his own. Yeah, there's a nice photo of him, and I think you could see maybe some optimism in that picture of what his life could look like, right? Like he's looking at the baseball, but really, I mean, he's looking at the baseball, but he's not. And I think that's you don't want to decontextualize that picture too much because he isn't able to play baseball. He's not able to do those things, right? Like he can grip a baseball when you ask him to. But this is a kid whose life is upended, and the Angels just weren't at the time of the story. Were not really willing to continue insuring him through this year. That's been that his family's financial situation is quite dire, and so that's just it's devastating. And he wasn't really getting any help, and his mom is really his only caretaker. And the hospital he was living in was going to discharge him because he wasn't improving fast enough, essentially. So it was just kind of entering into a place where his life maybe wasn't going to turn around. Thankfully, the Angels, I think the day after the story ran, let the family know that they'll be insuring him through their employment through the end of the year. So that's a positive. They'll also be paying his salary. We'll see what that does for this family. But I think it's just important to note that public pressure can work. And I don't. Angels weren't going to do the right thing here. Yeah, they do the right thing, and they finally caved on that front. So
Yeah, as you
not a,
reported,
it's yeah, it's like happy, and it's also kind of like devastating to think that that's what it took. Just look at the Dodgers have done the same thing with Andrew Tolles. The Padres have done the same thing since like the '90s with one of their like minor league relievers who has suffered a heart issue. I think so there is plenty of examples of teams kind of going into these situations and just doing the easiest thing imaginable, but it takes teeth pulling a little bit with the Angels. But thankfully they did it, and credit to them for that.
yeah, as you mentioned, as of early January, the Angels had not informed the family that they were going to continue to pay his health insurance. Now, to be fair to the Angels, they weren't necessarily even obligated to pay for his health insurance. Had Rio suffered this injury on a baseball field, had he had a brain aneurysm, even walking around Walmart, I think they would have felt a lot more obligated. But even Rio's mom acknowledges he got into a car with a drunk driver. He knew, well, maybe not drunk. He knew the driver was drinking. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Even the mom has acknowledged that he deserves some of the blame. Did that change the calculus at all in this situation?
If it did, that would be insane to me. I'm like, I get it. He's a 22-year-old that made a bad decision, but I mean, does that mean that no, he should never get help and he should just live, basically suffer the painful consequences that destroy him and his family for years? I don't. Those two things just don't calculate for me. So you're right. He made bad decisions, but I who hasn't? He's 22-year-old young man who went out to drink and screwed up, but I don't think that should mean he pays with the rest of his life. And I'm happy that the Angels have at least agreed with that for a year, and we'll continue to put pressure on them to do that again. When I say about pressure, I mean we'll continue to ask you about it, and public pressure will continue. I mean, because I just I don't. You're never supposed to be an advocate in these articles, but it's like personally quite painful to go watch this person suffer
Sure.
and watch his family suffer and realize that it's just you look at Joe Adell donated $5,000 to this guy. Yusei Kikuchi donated 10,000. Um, I don't know if those players had really even had any real meaningful relationship with Rio. I don't think I think they maybe met him in like spring training, but they were the ones who were taking money out of their paycheck. I mean, and helping his family out. And so I think it's that's the right thing to do. Those guys did the right thing. A lot of players across baseball, a lot of minor league players chipped in $100 here and there. So you get that is a heartening thing. But for the Angels to have to beg them essentially. I mean, so you want to be an advocate, but I'm not afraid to say that I think that this is a pretty easy choice.
Do you think, now that we're a couple of weeks removed from this story, were you able to discern whether your article spurred some action on the part of the Angels?
I mean, you just look at the days.
Yeah.
It's like I said. They had been, I think, in somewhat regular contact like up until like the middle or late November with his family, but then hadn't at all in December and through early January. And the people at bat, the baseball assistance team with Major League Baseball were, you know, just not really communicating very well. I think with his family, kind of having looked at those emails, it was a lot of formulaic emails, not really offering. I don't know. I don't want to characterize their emails, but it just wasn't. It didn't feel like they were really meeting her where she was at times. And it's after I reached out to both of those entities, she got a lot more contact. She heard from the Angel, she heard from Bat. She was able to kind of schedule all these things. So I think that pressure, realizing that there was a New York Times article coming, was going to impact it. I don't want to say for sure. I don't know what was in people's hearts and minds, but it seems, the timing seems pretty clear cut.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with a little advocacy journalism every now and then in the sports world, and I'm sure glad it worked out the way it did.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for Halo Territory today. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe. And just a reminder, we're going to try to put together an Angels mailbag soon. So please drop your questions into the Halo Territory X site. And that's going to be all today. We'll see you next time on Halo Territory.